The woven basket caught on a root, spinning slowly in the calm stretch of river. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, a newborn girl slept, unaware she was already lost. Kofi pulled the basket into his canoe, his heart stopping. Who would do this? He raised her as his own, his daughter, for 18 years, until the day the sky shattered with the roar of a helicopter and a stranger stepped out, claiming the life he had built. For Kofi, a fisherman whose entire world was the river's flow, she was a miracle. He named her Ada, raised her in his small village, love filling the space where answers should have been. But the river never gave up its secret. Who cast her away, and why, after all this time, has the past finally come to claim her? Kofi's life before Ada was the river's rhythm alone. Dawn patrols in his wooden canoe, hands roughened by nets, nights in a hut that echoed with silence. The village was his world, but it was a quiet one. The morning he found the basket, the water was strangely still. A shape bobbed against the current, wrapped in reeds. He thought it was lost goods until he heard the faint cry. His hands, so steady with fish, trembled as he lifted the cloth. A baby girl, her eyes wide and quiet, as if she had been waiting for him. He brought her to the village elders. They murmured about bad luck, spirits, trouble from upstream. But Kofi looked at her tiny fist curled around his finger, and his heart, long accustomed to solitude, made a decision. "She is mine," he said. And the river gave no argument. He named her Ada, meaning first daughter. She became his shadow in the canoe, laughing as water sprayed her face. He traded extra fish for milk, mended her clothes by firelight, sang her old songs his mother had forgotten. The village watched, skeptical at first, then accepting, the fisherman and his river child. But questions grew with her. Other children had mothers who looked like them. Ada would stare at her reflection in the river, then at Kofi's face, her brow furrowed. "Papa," she asked one evening, the fire between them, "where did I come from?" Kofi fed the flames, the lie he had prepared sticking in his throat. "The river brought you," he said, which was true, but not the whole truth. He saw the doubt in her eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. The mystery was a stone in his pocket, always present. He asked traders from upriver, described the finely woven basket. One man, years later, paused. "That weaving, that is from the far north. Expensive." The clue led nowhere but deepened the chill. Someone with means had done this. Meanwhile, Ada blossomed. She had Kofi's gentle patience, but a fierce curiosity he couldn't quench. She taught herself to read from old papers, dreamed of seeing the world beyond the bend in the river. Kofi's pride was laced with dread. Her spirit was too big for their small world. He knew, one day it would ask for more. On the morning of her 18th birthday, the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. They were mending nets on the bank, laughter easy between them. It was a perfect, fragile moment. Then the sound began, a distant thrum that hardened into a deafening roar. The village dogs howled, children screamed and ran. Kofi looked up, his blood turning to ice. A machine of metal and noise like a giant insect descended from the sky. It hovered over the clearing at the village's edge, whipping the river into a frenzy. The helicopter had found them, and as the doors slid open, Kofi's greatest fear took shape. A woman stepped out, her eyes scanning the crowd with desperate intensity, looking for only one thing. The woman's gaze swept past the frightened villagers and locked onto Ada. Her composure shattered. A raw, wounded sound escaped her lips, and she stumbled forward. "My child," she breathed. In that single phrase, Kofi's world cracked open. He moved without thought, stepping between them, his body a shield. "No," he said, his voice rough with a fear he'd never known. "You are mistaken." The woman didn't even look at him. Her eyes, filled with 18 years of longing, were only for the girl. "Amara," she whispered, using a name Kofi had never heard. "My Amara." Ada stood frozen, one hand gripping Kofi's arm. "Papa, who is she?" The woman finally looked at Kofi, and he saw it wasn't malice in her eyes, but a desperate, broken hope. "My name is Yasmin," she said, her voice trembling with the effort to hold itself together. 18 years ago, my newborn daughter was taken from me. I have searched every day since." A buzzing filled Kofi's ears. The secret he had carried, The unanswered question of the river was standing before him in a tailored suit, with a helicopter as her chariot. Denial rose hot in his throat. Many children are lost, he said. This one is found. She is my daughter. But Yasmin was prepared. From an aide behind her, she took a small, ancient-looking object. She held it out, her hands shaking. It was a bracelet, finely woven from a unique silver-blue thread, tiny and meant for an infant's wrist. She was wearing this when she was taken. Yasmin said, her eyes begging Ada to remember something impossible. The basket she was in was woven from the same rare reed, from the marshes near my home. The description was perfect. Kofi felt the ground tilt. He had burned that basket years ago, afraid of its magic, but he remembered the intricate pattern, the strange, durable fiber. He had kept the bracelet hidden, a secret too painful to explain. He had told Ada her one softness was her younger sister Lena. They were opposites, Yasmin, fierce and strategic, Lena, charming and restless, always in her shadow, always wanting what she had. Yasmin shared everything, her home, her success, her dreams. She did not see the rot of resentment growing in the shade she provided. When Yasmin became pregnant, it was a miracle she hadn't dared hope for. She named her daughter Amara, Grace. Lena was the first to hold her after the doctors. She cooed over the baby, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She looks just like you, Lena said, and Yasmin mistook the tightness in her voice for emotion. The betrayal happened on a night of violent storms. Yasmin, exhausted, fell into a deep sleep. Lena entered the nursery. The official story, the one Lena told through hysterical tears, was of a kidnapping, masked men, a window forced open, but the security system, which Lena allegedly forgot to arm, showed nothing. No forced entry, no strangers, just Lena, leaving the compound alone in the howling rain, a large woven bag in her arms. Yasmin's world became a forensic nightmare. Police investigations led nowhere, private detectives hit dead ends. Lena played the grieving aunt perfectly, supporting her sister, all while steering suspicion away from herself. The only clue was a single muddy footprint from a rare, handmade sandal, leading from the house to the raging river that bordered the estate. The sandal was Lena's size. The river, it had swallowed the evidence. The police declared it a tragic accident. The baby swept away. Yasmin refused to believe it. A mother's heart does not accept a void. She felt a pull, a certainty that her daughter was alive, carried by that same water to somewhere, to someone. She turned her corporate machinery into a search engine. She funded river patrols, offered staggering rewards in remote villages, used satellite imagery to track seasonal currents. Her obsession cost her relationships, her health pieces of her sanity. But she built a new theory, one the police dismissed. Her own sister had tried to destroy the one thing Yasmin loved most, not for ransom, but out of a jealous, twisted desire to make her suffer, as she felt she had suffered. Lena, confronted with the circumstantial evidence, vanished with a substantial portion of Yasmin's money, leaving a note that said simply, "You always win, sister. Now you know how it feels to lose." For Yasmina, the search became her only reason to breathe. Every report of a found child, every story of a river rescue was a flicker of hope. Then, a decade into the search, a tired field agent presented a photograph from a remote village, a girl, about 10, laughing in a canoe. The agent mentioned, almost as an afterthought, a persistent local tale about the fisherman who found a river miracle in a special basket. Yasmin's blood went cold. She demanded every detail. The description of the basket matched. It was the first thread. She pulled it. For 8 more years, she moved quietly, verifying, building certainty, fearing that a direct approach would scare the fisherman into hiding. She tracked Kofi's life, watched from a distance as Ada grew into a young woman. She saw the love in the fisherman's eyes, and it filled her with a terrible, conflicting storm of gratitude and agonizing jealousy. This man had given her daughter the life she could not, and he had taken her. The helicopter's downdraft finally stilled. In the ringing silence of the village clearing, 2 realities faced each other. Yasmin, with her proof and her bottomless grief. Kofi, with his love and his 18-year-old lie. Ada stood between them, the axis on which both their worlds turned. She looked at Yasmin, this stranger who was a ghost story made flesh. "You let her go," Ada said, her voice surprisingly steady, accusing. "You left me in a river." Yasmin flinched as if struck. "No, my darling, never. I have spent every second since you were torn from me trying to bring you home." She turned her fury on the absent culprit. "My sister, your aunt, she did this, out of a hatred I was too blind to see." The story spilled out, the empire, the jealousy, the storm, the footprint by the river. It was too vast, too cinematic, for their small village. It sounded like a radio drama, but the pain on Yasmin's face was not fiction. It was a mirror of Kofi's own fear. Kofi found his voice, hoarse and defiant. "You bring this storm into our home. Your family's poison almost killed her once, and now you return to drag her into that world. She is safe here. She is loved here. She is my daughter." Yasmin's composure finally broke, her shout echoing against the huts. "You kept her from me. You had a bracelet that could have ended my suffering years ago." The accusation hung in the air, true and terrible. Ada was crying now, silent tears cutting through the dust on her cheeks. She was not a child anymore. She was a young woman whose history had just been violently rewritten. She looked at Kofi, her beloved papa, and saw the guilt he had hidden. She looked at Yasmin, the phantom mother, and saw the raw, unhealed wound. "I need to think," Ada whispered. And then she turned and ran. Not toward their hut, but into the dense green wall of the riverside forest, disappearing from both of them. Kofi made to follow, but Yasmin's hand shot out, not to grab him but to plead. "Wait," she said, all the fight gone from her, replaced by a profound exhaustion. "Please, I did not come to steal her in the night. I came to see the face I dream about, to know she lives." She paused, the billionaire brought low by a fisherman's love. "But she is not only yours anymore, and she is not only mine. She is caught between 2 rivers. We must decide, together, where she belongs." Kofi stared at her, his heart a battlefield. The woman who had lost everything was offering a terrible partnership. The war for Ada's future had just begun, and the first casualty was the simple truth of the past. Ada did not return by nightfall. The forest, usually a place of familiar sounds, became a cavern of terrifying silence. Kofi stood at the edge, calling until his voice cracked, his fear of physical pain. Yasmin watched from a distance, her professional facade gone, replaced by the raw terror of a mother losing her child for a second time. She had sent her security team into the trees, but they moved like foreigners, snapping branches, scaring wildlife. You're making it worse. Kofi finally snapped at her. She knows these woods. You do not a truce born of shared panic. Formed in the dark, Kofi took a lantern. Yasmin, ignoring her aide's protests, followed him, leaving her expensive shoes stuck in the mud. They moved in tense silence, their only common language, the name they called into the night. Ada Amara. They found her by the riverbank, miles upstream from the village, sitting on a rock where the water churned white. She was shivering, her arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't look at them as they approached. I heard you both, she said quietly. Two different names. Which one am I? The question hung over the rushing water. Yasmin knelt in the damp earth, heedless of her clothes. You are Amara, Yasmin Odate. You are my heir. You have a home, a legacy, a life waiting for you that you cannot imagine. Kofi stayed standing, his shadow falling over them. You are Ada, Kofi's daughter. You have a home here, with the people who have loved you every day of your life. A legacy of kindness, not of mines and money. Ada looked from one to the other, tears mingling with the river spray on her face. I feel torn in half, she whispered. I love you, Papa. But she looks like me. It was the simplest, most devastating observation. In Yasmin's face, Ada finally saw a genetic echo she had searched for in every river reflection. They brought her back to the village. The helicopter was gone, but Yasmin and a small security detail remained, setting up tents that looked alien against the mud and thatch. The village was divided. Some saw Yasmin as a queen reclaiming her stolen jewel. Others saw her as a predator, come to take the heart of their community. For 3 days, an uneasy stalemate held. Yasmin did not try to force Ada to leave. Instead, she tried to build a bridge, sharing photos of her family home, of Ada's grandparents she never knew. She spoke of universities, of travel, of a world of possibility. Kofi could only offer the familiar, the rhythm of the nets, the smell of smoke, the certainty of his love. He was fighting a battle with the wrong weapons. Then, the outside world crashed in. A local journalist, tipped off by someone in Yasmin's camp, published the story. Billionaire Hires found alive in remote village. Within hours, satellite news trucks choked the narrow dirt road to the village. Cameras pointed at Kofi's hut. Reporters shouted questions about kidnapping and reward money. The narrative spiraled out of control. Online, Kofi was painted as a possible kidnapper, a poor man who stole a child for ransom. Yasmin was cast as both a tragic heroine and a ruthless imperialist, using her wealth to bulldoze a simple man's life. The truth, a story of rescue, love, and a sister's jealousy, was drowned out by the noise. This was the it gets worse moment. The private agony became a public spectacle. Ada was now a prisoner in her own home, afraid to step outside lest a camera be shoved in her face. The pressure was a vice, tightening daily. Yasmin, used to controlling narratives, was furious. She held a terse press conference at the edge of the village, her voice like steel. Kofi saved my daughter's life. He is her father in every way that matters. This is a private family matter. You are trespassing on our grief and our joy. It did little to help. It only made the story bigger. Kofi, overwhelmed, made his first desperate move. He sought out the village elder, a retired magistrate. Can they take her, he asked, his voice hollow. The old man sighed. The law is a tangled net, Kofi. You have no formal adoption papers. She is not your blood. That woman, she has birth records, DNA, infinite resources. If she petitions the court, she will win. Love is not a document the state recognizes. Hope began to leak away. The love that had been his fortress was now, in the eyes of the world, a shaky defense. Then a new email arrived on Yasmin's secure satellite device. It was from an untraceable account. The subject line, a sister's regret. The blood drained from Yasmin's face. She opened it alone in her tent, her hands ice cold. The message was from Lena. It was not an apology, it was a confession wrapped in a threat. You were right, Yasmin. I took her. I looked into her perfect little face, and I saw your future, your happiness, everything I could never have. I didn't have the courage to kill her, so I gave her to the river, a cleaner death, I thought. Imagine my surprise to learn she lived. You always were lucky. The words were vile, but they were not the punchline. The punchline was the attached file. It was a scanned document, a secretly amended clause to Yasmin's own corporate charter, dated just before Amara's birth. It stated that in the event of Yasmin's death without a verifiable bloodline heir, controlling shares of the empire would revert to her next of kin, Lena. The signature was a forgery, but a stunningly good one. Lena's final line read, "If Amara disappears again, or if her paternity is ever legally questioned, this document finds its way to the board. They will believe you created it in grief. They will tear your company apart. Let the fisherman keep his child. Walk away. Sister, this is your final loss." Yasmin sat in the humming silence of the tent, the screen's glow etching lines of horror onto her face. Lena wasn't just a jealous sister. She was a patient, long-game strategist. She had planned for every outcome, even this one 18 years later. The threat was monstrous. Abandon your daughter again, or watch the life's work you built for her be destroyed by the very person who tried to kill her. She now faced an impossible choice: fight for Ada publicly and risk Lena detonating a scandal that would shatter her company and her daughter's future inheritance, or walk away secretly, condemning herself to a second, even more agonizing loss, to protect Ada from a different kind of poison. She looked at the tent flap, beyond which was the humble hut where her daughter slept. The river that had given Ada life now seemed to flow with a new insidious current, one of corporate blackmail and familial hatred. The battle was no longer just between a mother and a father. It had been invaded by a ghost from the past, armed with paperwork instead of a knife, but aiming for the heart all the same. The next morning, Yasmin requested a meeting with Kofi alone. Her eyes were haunted, her energy completely changed. She showed him Lena's email. Kofi, who understood nets and currents, now had to decipher the tangled lines of corporate law and blackmail. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening. "She wins if I fight," Yasmin said, her voice flat. "She wins if I leave. Her poison is still in the water." Kofi looked from the screen to Yasmin's devastated face. For the first time, he didn't see a billionaire. He saw another victim of the same cruelty that had sent Ada to him. The enemy was not in this tent. The enemy was a shadow, still pulling strings. "Then we do not play her game," Kofi said, the words emerging slowly, as if from a deep place. "We change the rules." Yasmin stared at him. "How?" Kofi looked toward the river. "The law speaks of papers and blood. But there's another voice, the voice of the village, the voice of the person at the center of it all." He met her gaze. "We stop deciding for Ada. We let her choose. And whatever she chooses, we stand together, you and I. One story, one front. Your sister's lie thrives in our division. Let us take that weapon from her." It was a staggering proposal, an alliance between the river and the boardroom, to present a united face to Ada, to the world, and to the spectral threat of Lena. It meant Yasmin would have to publicly validate Kofi's fatherhood. It meant Kofi would have to accept Yasmin's motherhood. It meant trusting the very person they had seen as their rival. Yasmin, cornered by a threat to everything she valued, saw the brutal logic. It was the only move Lena wouldn't expect. A shared custody of the truth. They called Ada to the space between the hut and the tents, a no man's land that had become their world. Together they told her everything about Lena's email, the blackmail, the forged document. They laid their vulnerabilities at her feet. "The choice was never just between two homes," Yasmin said, her voice thick. "It is between a past that wants to destroy you and a future we have to build together, differently." Ada listened, her expression unreadable. She looked at her father, who had given her life. She looked at her mother, who had never stopped searching for it. She saw the shadow of the aunt she never knew, still trying to control her destiny from the darkness. The public spectacle, the legal threats, the corporate blackmail, all of it had been noise. This finally was the clear, brutal truth. And it demanded an answer not from a daughter or an heiress, but from a young woman who had just learned that her life was the prize in a war that began before she drew her first breath. She took a deep, steadying breath, the weight of 18 years and 2 families on her shoulders. "Here is what I choose," she said. Ada's voice did not waver. "I choose the river. I choose the village. This is my home." Kofi's heart soared, but Yasmin's face fell into a mask of utter devastation. Then Ada continued, turning to her, "And I choose to know where I came from. You are my mother. That is also my home. She looked between them, her expression resolute. I will not be torn, so I will live in both. Part of the year here with my papa, part of the year with you learning about the other half of who I am. But I am not a possession to be divided. I am a person who can love two places and two people at once. It was a solution born of a wisdom that surpassed her 18 years. A refusal to accept the either-or trap that everyone else had built around her. For a long moment, neither adult spoke, humbled by the clarity of the child they had both been fighting over. Yasmin was the first to move. She stepped forward, tears streaming freely now, and she did not reach for Ada. Instead, she extended her hand to Kofi. "You raised a queen," she said. Her voice choked. "Thank you." Kofi, after a heartbeat's hesitation, took her hand. It was not a warm embrace, but it was a pact, a recognition. The alliance they had theorized was now made real by the daughter who demanded it. The next moves were practical, and Yasmin's resources executed them with swift precision. First, the public narrative had to be controlled. They held a joint press conference. Yasmin stood flanked by Ada and Kofi. She told the true story of Lena's betrayal, of Kofi's rescue, of a child loved by two families. She presented Kofi not as a kidnapper, but as a hero and a co-parent. The story transformed from a scandal into a saga. The world watched, captivated then, the legal framework. Yasmin's lawyers, working with the local magistrate, drafted a unique, binding guardianship agreement. Kofi was formally, legally named Ada's adoptive father and primary guardian. Yasmin was recognized as the biological mother with shared custodial rights during agreed-upon periods. Ada's identity was legally hyphenated, Ada Amara Kofi Odate. It was a document that honored nurture and nature in equal measure. With her public and legal position secured, Yasmin turned her full attention to the ghost. Lena's blackmail had been a weapon of shadows. Yasmin countered with the relentless light of the law. She forwarded the threatening email to her board and to international authorities, preempting Lena's move. She launched a massive civil suit for theft, fraud, and emotional distress, freezing what remained of Lena's stolen assets. The final act of justice, however, came from an unexpected place. A year after the helicopter's arrival, Lena was located living under an assumed name in a neighboring country. The tip to the authorities did not come from Yasmin's private investigators. It came from a collective of River Village traders who had heard the story and recognized Lena's description from an old photo Yasmin had shared. The network of humble people, once invisible to Lena, became the net that caught her. She was extradited and faced a mountain of charges. The cycle of poison was broken. Life settled into a new complex rhythm. Ada kept her word. Her university studies in environmental science were funded by Yasmin, but she returned to the village every holiday, her suitcase full of books, her head full of new ideas that she used to help Kofi and his friends improve fish preservation techniques. She became a bridge in the truest sense. Kofi's hut gained a solar-powered satellite phone, a gift from Yasmin so he could call his daughter anytime. He never got used to the device, but he cherished the crackly sound of her voice. Yasmin, in turn, learned to sit quietly in a canoe, to appreciate a sunset that wasn't framed by a skyscraper window. They never became friends, but they built a respect forged in mutual love for one extraordinary young woman. The final, surprising detail emerged 5 years later. Ada, now a graduate, was working on a clean water project for villages along the Great River. During a survey, she discovered that the very marshes where the special reeds grew, the reeds that had woven her first basket, were being poisoned by runoff from an illegal mining operation upstream. With the fierce determination of both her fathers, she took the data to Yasmin. Mother and daughter stood side by side in a corporate boardroom. Yasmin once ruled alone, using Yasmin's influence and Ada's grassroots evidence. They shut down the illegal operation and funded a restoration project. The river that had carried Ada to safety and the reeds that had once cradled her were now protected by her own hands. The story that began with a basket thrown into the water in hatred had come full circle, ending with that same river being healed by the child it had saved. The legacy was no longer one of mines or money, or simply of fish and nets. It became a legacy of stewardship, born from the confluence of two worlds. Ada stood on the bank of the river, the place where all her journeys began. She was neither just the fisherman's daughter, nor just the billionaire's heir. She was something new, something stronger, a testament to the idea that love, in its truest form, doesn't divide, it multiplies. And sometimes the deepest currents of fate don't lead to a choice between two shores, but to the creation of a brand new river. So what does this story teach us? That our lives are not defined by the currents that carry us, but by the choices we make when we reach the shore. Kofi chose to lift a basket from the water, Yasmin chose to search for 2 decades, and Ada chose to build a bridge where everyone else saw a canyon. In a world that often asks us to pick a side, to define ourselves by one truth, one family, one home, this story whispers a different possibility, that the heart is not a container with limited space. It is a river able to hold countless streams, each one making it deeper, wider, stronger. The helicopter that descended on that village didn't just bring a mother, it brought a question we all must face. What are we willing to hold on to, and what are we brave enough to let flow? Love in its truest form isn't about possession, it's about presence. It's about showing up day after day in whatever way you can. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? And if you were in Ada's place, which choice would you have made? Tell me in the comments below. If this story of 2 families and 1 river reminded you that kindness can alter the course of a life, then do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more true stories of hope and humanity to the surface. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, the most powerful currents are the ones of compassion. Never underestimate the ripple effect of a single kind act.